My name is Natalie Mercer. I'm 33 years old, and last Friday night, my mother stood in the middle of her anniversary party, smiled at 37 guests, and announced that everyone in the family was flying to Lake Como for 2 weeks. Except me, because somebody needed to stay home and raise my sister's children while they enjoyed themselves. The room laughed softly at first, not because it was funny, because they thought it was a joke. Then they realized it wasn't, and nobody knew where to look. Not my father, who suddenly became very interested in folding his napkin into perfect corners. Not my sister Vanessa, who took a sip of champagne to avoid meeting my eyes. Not her husband Ethan, who checked his Apple Watch like this entire conversation was cutting into billable hours. And definitely not me. I stood near the candlelit dining table holding a silver serving tray that suddenly felt heavy enough to break my wrists. "Natalie understands," my mother said smoothly, touching the pearls at her throat. "She's always been better with children than with ambition." A few people shifted uncomfortably. One woman coughed into her wine glass. Someone near the windows whispered, "Jesus." But my mother kept smiling, because humiliation only works if the victim cooperates. And for 33 years, I always had. Until that night. The Mercer family lived in a gated neighborhood outside Chicago, where every mailbox matched and every lawn looked professionally edited. Our house sat at the end of a curved street lined with imported maple trees my mother liked to brag about, even though she had not planted a single one herself. White brick, black shutters, 3-car garage. The kind of house designed to look successful from a distance. Inside, everything smelled faintly expensive. Lemon polish, fresh lilies. The subtle scent of money trying very hard not to look nervous. My father, Richard Mercer, built commercial properties across Illinois before semi-retiring after a mild heart scare 3 years ago. My mother, Celeste Mercer, treated social status like a full-time religion. Dinner parties, fundraisers, charity boards, country club politics. Her entire personality was built around being the woman everyone envied slightly. Then there was Vanessa, my younger sister by 2 years, beautiful in the polished, effortless way expensive women become after enough Botox and Pilates classes. Blonde hair always glossy, nails always perfect, wedding ring large enough to catch restaurant lighting from across a room. Vanessa married Ethan Cole at 26, private equity, tall, cold eyes. The kind of man who said resource management instead of people. Together they had 2 children. Mila was 6, Carter was 4. And somehow, without anybody officially deciding it, I became the 3rd parent. Not emotionally. Operationally, I knew Carter's allergy medication dosage by memory. I knew Mila refused to sleep unless somebody checked her closet twice. I knew which stuffed rabbit had to go in the car during long drives or tantrums became nuclear. Their own parents barely knew those things. I did, because I was always there. That was the problem. People don't respect what's permanently available. At first, it happened slowly. "Natalie, can you pick Mila up from dance? Natalie, can you stay late tonight? Natalie, can you cancel your weekend plans? Natalie, you're just so much better at this than we are." It never sounded cruel. That's what made it dangerous. Exploitation sounds soft when it grows inside families. By 33, my life looked stable from the outside. I worked remotely as a financial records analyst for a healthcare company. Flexible schedule, good at spreadsheets, quiet, reliable. Those 4 words destroyed my life for years. Quiet, reliable, flexible, available. I had been engaged once. His name was Daniel Brooks, architect, warm smile, terrible at confrontation. We lasted 5 years. The breakup happened in our apartment kitchen while frozen lasagna cooked in the oven and rain hit the windows hard enough to sound angry. Daniel wouldn't look at me when he said it. "You make everybody else the center of your life, Natalie." I remember laughing nervously because I thought we were discussing stress. Then he added quietly, "And after a while, there's nothing left of you to love." That sentence hollowed me out, not because it was cruel, because part of me knew it was true. After he left, I spent 6 straight weeks functioning like a ghost. Wake up, work, drive to my sister's house, help with dinner, bath time, laundry, sleep, repeat. Nobody noticed I was disappearing because disappearing had become my role. Then one night, completely by accident, something changed. I was waiting for Carter during pediatric speech therapy in downtown Chicago when I wandered into a tiny independent bookstore across the street. Near the back, a woman sat alone reading excerpts from her memoir to maybe 12 people. No spotlight, no glamour, just her voice. Honest, raw, painfully human. Nobody interrupted her. Nobody needed anything from her. For 40 minutes, people simply listened. And something inside me cracked open. That same night, I bought a cheap microphone online. 3 months later, I anonymously launched a storytelling podcast called Invisible Daughters. Stories about women who became emotional employees inside their own families. The caretaker daughter, the fixer, the unpaid therapist, the invisible one everyone relied on, but nobody truly saw. At first, only 14 people listened, then 50, then 300. By year 2, I had nearly 80,000 subscribers across platforms. Women sent messages at 2 a.m. saying, "I thought I was crazy until I heard this. You described my entire life. I cried in my car listening to episode 7. Nobody knew the creator was me, not my parents, not Vanessa, not Ethan, not even Daniel. I used a fake name online, no photographs, no interviews, nothing traceable. Because deep down, I knew exactly what my family would do if they found something meaningful that belonged to me. They would minimize it, shrink it, turn it into something decorative and harmless. So I protected it, like people protect oxygen underwater. 3 weeks before my parents' anniversary dinner, I received an email that changed everything. Subject line: Partnership Discussion, Northline Studios. I almost deleted it. Northline Studios produce some of the biggest documentary podcasts in America. Real productions, real budgets, real audiences. I opened the message while sitting in Vanessa's kitchen cutting crusts off Carter's sandwich, because apparently he decided corners were aggressive that week. Natalie Mercer. We've been listening to Invisible Daughters for months. We believe there's potential for a premium serialized adaptation. Would you be open to a conversation in Los Angeles next month? I stopped breathing. Vanessa looked up from her phone. You okay? I locked my screen immediately. Yeah, work email. She nodded without interest. Of course she did. To my family, I existed in permanent background blur. Useful enough to notice, important enough to see. The anniversary dinner preparation started 6 days before the event.
which really meant I started preparing 6 days before the event. My mother handed me a handwritten list so long it looked like hostage instructions. Confirm florist, fix seating arrangement, pick up wine order, steam table linens, coordinate valet timing, print menus, call bakery,
watch children during rehearsal dinner. At one point, I stood in her kitchen reading the list while she inspected orchids under pendant lighting. "You know," I said carefully, "Vanessa could help with some of this." My mother actually looked confused. "But you're better at details." There it was again, the compliment-shaped trap. I almost said no. Almost. Instead, I heard myself say, "Okay." That's the horrifying thing about emotional conditioning. Sometimes your mouth obeys before your brain gets a vote. The dinner itself took place at the Blackstone Hotel downtown. Private ballroom, tall gold candles, live jazz trio near the windows. Custom menus embossed with my parents' initials. Every detail elegant enough to hide the rot underneath. I arrived at noon. Guests arrived at 7. That meant 7 hours of labor before I even sat down. I adjusted centerpieces, fixed name cards, repositioned chairs, helped the event manager handle a last-minute seafood issue. By 6:20 p.m., my feet were throbbing inside black heels I regretted buying. I finally slipped into the bathroom to change into my dress, dark emerald silk, simple, classy, the kind of dress designed not to attract criticism from women like my mother. When I walked out, she scanned me once and frowned slightly. "You could have done something with your hair." No hello, no thank you, just evaluation. I looked at her reflection in the mirror. "You look beautiful too, Mom." That satisfied her immediately, because admiration was emotional currency to people like Celeste Mercer. Guests flooded the ballroom exactly on time. Wealthy couples, developers, surgeons, country club friends, women whose faces barely moved when they laughed, men who checked stock prices during conversations. Vanessa arrived 40 minutes late in a white satin dress so tight she needed Ethan to help her sit. My mother nearly cried from happiness. "Oh my God, look at you!" Vanessa smiled dramatically. "Mila threw up right before we left. It was chaos." I knew instantly she was lying. Mila always got motion sick after dairy. Vanessa had probably ignored it again. Then Carter saw me across the ballroom. "Natalie!" He sprinted toward me so fast he almost collided with a waiter carrying champagne. I caught him automatically, his small arms wrapped around my neck. "You came!" 3 words, tiny voice, and somehow that hurt worse than my mother ever could. Because children always reveal the truth adults try to hide. He expected me more than his own parents did. For the next 2 hours, I became invisible again, watching children during speeches, taking them to the restroom, cleaning spilled juice, fixing a broken bow tie, finding missing crayons, while Vanessa drank champagne and laughed loud enough for nearby tables to hear how happy she was. At 8:53 p.m., my father stood for the anniversary toast. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly. Conversations softened. Phones lowered. My mother reached for his hand. He smiled the same practiced smile he used in business meetings, right before manipulating somebody into agreement. 42 years ago, he began warmly, Celeste and I started building a life together. Applause, soft laughter. He continued. And because family means everything to us, we decided it's time to celebrate properly. Vanessa already knew. I could tell by the anticipation in her face. Ethan smirked into his whiskey. My stomach tightened. We're taking the whole family to Lake Como for 2 weeks this summer. The room erupted instantly. Oh my God! That's incredible! So glamorous! My mother dabbed fake tears carefully enough not to ruin mascara. Vanessa squealed loud enough to turn heads from nearby tables. And for one stupid, fragile second, I felt happy. Actually happy. Because maybe this time they remembered me too. Maybe this time I wasn't just operational support. Maybe... What dates are we leaving? I asked softly, and the entire energy of the table changed. Not dramatically. That would have been easier. No, it shifted subtly, like a room noticing smoke before fire. Vanessa looked down immediately. Ethan inhaled through his nose. My father adjusted his cufflink. My mother smiled too fast. "Natalie," she said gently, "sweetheart, you won't be coming on this trip." The ballroom noise faded behind a ringing pressure in my ears. I stared at her. "I'm sorry?" Vanessa leaned forward carefully. "We just assumed you'd stay with the kids." Assumed. That word hit harder than yelling ever could. My father spoke calmly. "It simply makes the most sense." Ethan added without looking up, "The villa isn't really childproof." Like I was household staff discussing logistics. I looked around slowly. Nobody moved. Nobody defended me. Not one person. 37 witnesses, and every single one silently accepted that my life mattered less than everyone else's convenience. "Natalie understands sacrifice," my mother said proudly to the table. And that sentence changed the direction of my entire life. Because suddenly I realized something horrifying. They weren't embarrassed. They genuinely believed this was fair. I smiled slowly, not because I was okay, because something inside me had finally stopped begging to be loved correctly. And when that happens, people become dangerous. The ballroom applause faded slowly. Not because people were still excited about Lake Como, because they were pretending not to notice me. That's the thing nobody tells you about humiliation in wealthy families. It's rarely loud. Real humiliation happens in polished rooms where everyone silently agrees not to interrupt the performance. I sat there smiling while my mother accepted congratulations she did not deserve. My wine remained untouched. Across the table, Vanessa was already talking about villa aesthetics. "We should do a white dinner one night," she said excitedly, "like all white outfits with candles everywhere." Ethan nodded absently while typing something on his phone, probably billing someone for existing. My father finally glanced toward me. "You're quiet." There was actual irritation in his voice, as if my silence was becoming socially inconvenient. "I'm listening," I said. My mother leaned toward me slightly. "Don't pout, Natalie. It's childish." Childish. Interesting word to use on the daughter expected to raise everyone else's children. A waiter appeared beside me. "More wine, miss?" Before I could answer, my mother spoke for me. "She's driving." The waiter nodded and moved on. That tiny moment almost made me laugh. 33 years old and still being managed like a teenager in public. Across the ballroom, the jazz trio transitioned into something softer. Glasses clinked. People resumed conversations. The event kept moving because privileged people are experts at continuing dinner after emotional casualties. Then Carter tugged my sleeve. "Natalie," he whispered. Not Aunt Natalie, just Natalie. Because children call you what feels safest. Can we go to the bathroom? Of course. I stood immediately, not because I had to, because helping him still felt natural. That was the terrifying part. Love remained even after clarity arrived. I took his small hand and walked him through the ballroom. As we passed a table near the windows, I heard two women whispering. Did you know they weren't taking her? She practically raises those kids. How awful. Their pity crawled across my skin. Carter looked up at me while we waited outside the restroom. Are you sad? The question hit harder than anything my mother had said all night. I crouched slightly. Why would you ask that? Because your eyes look shiny. Children notice everything adults spend years ignoring. I swallowed carefully. I'm okay. He nodded like he didn't believe me. Then he wrapped his arms around my neck for exactly 2 seconds before running into the restroom. And standing there outside that marble bathroom under soft gold lighting, I realized something devastating. The only people in my family who loved me without using me were under 7 years old. When we returned to the ballroom, my mother intercepted us immediately. There you are, she said sharply. Dessert service is starting and Mila refuses to sit still. Translation: resume your assigned function. I looked at her for a long moment. Something about my expression unsettled her. What? She asked defensively. I'm not childcare staff. Her face froze. Not fully, just enough. You're being dramatic. No, I said quietly. I'm being clear. Vanessa immediately looked nervous. Natalie. No, seriously, I continued calmly. You announced in front of 37 people that I'm apparently not part of the family vacation because my role is staying behind to raise your children. A nearby conversation stopped. My mother lowered her voice instantly. Do not do this here. Again, that sentence. Not, you're hurt. Not, we handled this badly. Only, don't make the audience uncomfortable. Ethan finally looked up from his phone. It's not personal. I turned toward him slowly. Interesting. Because it feels extremely personal. He sighed, the way overpaid men do when they believe emotions are inefficiencies. Natalie, we all make sacrifices. I almost smiled, because people like Ethan always say we when they mean somebody else. You mean I make sacrifices, I corrected. Vanessa stood quickly. Can we please not ruin Mom and Dad's night? There it was. The family hierarchy in one sentence. Image first, truth later. Always. I looked around the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers. Soft piano now replacing jazz. Women laughing too loudly near the bar. A photographer taking staged anniversary pictures beside a flower wall I had spent 4 hours helping assemble. Everything beautiful. Everything rotten underneath. And suddenly I felt tired. Not emotionally. Physically tired. Bone tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying emotional weight for so many years, your nervous system forgets what rest feels like. My mother stepped closer. We'll discuss this tomorrow. No, I said. The word landed harder than shouting. She blinked. Because daughters like me were not supposed to say no calmly. Angry daughters could be dismissed. Crying daughters could be manipulated. Calm daughters terrified people. My father stood. That's enough. I looked at him. Really looked at him, his expensive suit, his silver cufflinks, the tiny stain near his tie from dessert he hadn't noticed. This man had watched me sacrifice pieces of myself for years because it kept his life smooth. and suddenly I understood something ugly. Passive people still benefit from cruelty. "I'm leaving," I said. Vanessa stared. "You can't just leave." I almost laughed. "Watch me." Instead, I picked up my purse slowly. Mila looked confused. "Are you coming back?" The room went silent again. Not fully, just enough. And every adult at that table waited to see whether I would continue performing loyalty while being publicly discarded. I bent down beside her chair. "No, sweetheart," I said gently. "Not tonight." Then I walked out of the ballroom while 37 people watched the family's invisible daughter finally become visible for the worst possible reason. The elevator ride down felt unreal. Soft instrumental music played overhead, while my reflection stared back at me from mirrored walls. I looked composed. That was the scary part. No tears, no shaking, just stillness. My phone started vibrating before I even reached the parking garage. Mom calling. Decline. Vanessa calling. Decline. Mom calling again. Decline. Then a text. "You are embarrassing this family." I stared at the screen. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Can we talk?" Only reputation management. I unlocked my car and sat inside without turning the engine on. Rain hit the windshield in soft, uneven patterns. Downtown Chicago glowed wet and gold outside the garage entrance. Another text appeared. "Vanessa, please don't do this to us." Us. Interesting choice. Because somehow the victim always became the aggressor once she stopped cooperating. Then Ethan texted. "We need a final answer about the kids by Monday." Not even pretending anymore. No apology, no discussion, just logistics. I screenshot all 3 messages. Then I opened a folder in my phone labeled Receipts. The title felt dramatic when I created it weeks earlier after smaller incidents. Now it felt necessary. At 11:42 p.m., another notification appeared. Marisol Vega. "How did dinner go?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed, "I think my family finally made a mistake big enough that I can't pretend anymore." 3 dots appeared instantly. "Call me." I did. Marisol answered on the first ring. She didn't say hello. She said, "What happened?" And for the next 23 minutes, parked alone in a dim garage while rainwater rolled down concrete walls, I told another human being the truth without protecting my family once. The public humiliation, the trip, the babysitting expectation, the years of emotional labor, the invisible role. Marisol stayed quiet until I finished. Then she said something that changed me permanently. "Natalie, do you realize they only panicked once you stopped functioning?" Silence. My throat tightened. Because she was right. Nobody cared when I was hurt. They cared when I became unavailable. I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes. "Oh my God." "Yeah," Marisol said softly. "That realization usually changes people forever." A car passed nearby, headlights sweeping briefly across my windshield. "You know what the worst part is?" I whispered. "What?" "I still feel guilty." Marisol actually laughed once. "Of course you do. That's how conditioning works." Conditioning. Not love. Conditioning. The word settled into me slowly and heavily. "Natalie," she continued carefully, "I need to ask you something." "What?" "If Northline officially offers you the studio partnership," she paused, "would you actually leave Chicago?" The question scared me instantly, not because I didn't want to leave, because part of me already had. I got home just after midnight. My apartment felt unusually quiet. Not lonely, quiet. There's a difference. I kicked off my heels near the couch and stood in darkness for almost a full minute. No children yelling, no family group chat notifications, no expectations waiting inside the walls. Just silence. Then my phone rang again. Dad. I considered ignoring it. Instead, I answered. Natalie? His voice carried that familiar, controlled calm, the voice he used during business negotiations. You upset your mother tonight. Not, you okay? Interesting. I embarrassed her, I corrected. A pause. You know how important appearances are to her. There it was, the closest thing my father ever came to honesty. I sat slowly at my kitchen counter. You let her humiliate me in front of everyone. His exhale crackled softly through the speaker. It wasn't meant that way. How was it meant? Silence. I waited. He had no answer, because intent means nothing when disrespect becomes routine. Finally, he said, You know your sister needs help. I looked around my tiny apartment, the dishes in the sink, the unpaid electric bill near my laptop, the microphone set up beside the window where I recorded Invisible Daughters at night after everyone else finished needing me. And what do I need? I asked quietly. That question destroyed him. Not dramatically, not loudly, but I heard the silence afterward, the complete absence of language from a man who had spent his entire life assuming his eldest daughter required nothing. I have an early morning, he said finally. Of course he did. Avoidance disguised as practicality. Good night, Dad. Natalie. But I ended the call. Then I did something I had never done before in my entire life. I turned my phone completely off. No emergency access, no family contact, no ability for them to reach me whenever they wanted emotional service. The silence afterward felt terrifying and unbelievably peaceful. At 1:13 a.m., unable to sleep, I opened my laptop and logged into the Invisible Daughters production dashboard. New listener numbers loaded slowly. 82,441 subscribers. My newest episode had crossed 500,000 downloads. 500,000. I stared at the number. My family thought I had nothing important happening. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of strangers stayed awake, listening to my voice, crying to my stories, healing through my work, being changed by something I created. And suddenly, another realization hit me hard enough to steal my breath. My family didn't know me anymore. Not really. They knew the version of me most useful to them. But the real Natalie? The woman building something powerful quietly in the dark? They had never cared enough to ask about her. At 2:04 a.m., an email notification appeared. From Northline Studios. Subject: Formal invitation. My pulse spiked instantly. I opened it carefully. Natalie, after internal review, we would like to formally invite you to Los Angeles for final partnership discussions regarding Invisible Daughters. We believe the project has national potential. I stopped reading halfway through because my vision blurred suddenly. National potential. Not cute, not nice, not helpful, important, real, professional. I pressed my hand against my mouth, and for the first time in years, I cried for myself instead of for everyone else. I woke up at 6:11 the next morning to violent pounding on my apartment door. Not knocking, pounding. The kind that immediately spikes your heart rate because your body assumes something terrible has happened. For one disoriented second, I thought maybe somebody was dead. Then I heard my mother's voice through the door. "Natalie, open this door right now." Of course. Not grief. Control. I sat up slowly on the couch, still wearing yesterday's sweater. My neck ached. My laptop glowed dimly on the coffee table beside half-finished notes for the next Invisible Daughters episode. Outside, Celeste Mercer continued hammering against the door, hard enough that my downstairs neighbor shouted, "Some people are trying to sleep." "I'm her mother," mine snapped back instantly, like that explained everything. It did explain everything. To her, motherhood was permanent access, permanent authority, permanent ownership. I stood, crossed the apartment, and checked the peephole. My mother stood rigid in cream cashmere, despite the rain outside. Perfect hair, pearl earrings, rage vibrating beneath expensive composure. Vanessa stood beside her, looking exhausted and anxious. Ethan stayed farther back, near the stairwell, scrolling through his phone like he hoped not to be emotionally involved. Coward. I opened the door halfway. My mother immediately pushed inside. No invitation, no hesitation. She swept into my apartment, looking around with visible disapproval. The old radiator hissed loudly beside the window. My dishes from last night still sat in the sink. One throw blanket had fallen onto the floor during the night. Her eyes registered all of it. The judgment came automatically. "You're still living like this?" Interesting. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Can we talk?" Just criticism. Vanessa closed the door quietly behind them. "Natalie," she started softly, "we need to fix this." Fix. Another dangerous family word, because in families like mine, fixing never meant accountability. It meant restoring comfort for everyone except the injured person. I folded my arms. "It's 7 in the morning. You turned your phone off," my mother snapped. "Yes. You don't turn your phone off when family is trying to reach you." And there it was again, the assumption that my existence remained permanently accessible to them. I looked directly at her. "I do now." The sentence hit harder than yelling ever could. My mother blinked slowly, almost offended by the concept itself. Vanessa stepped forward carefully. "Can we all calm down?" I nearly laughed, because people only ask for calm after benefiting from someone else's silence. Ethan finally looked up from his phone. "We just need clarity about Aspen." There was something genuinely unbelievable about him. The emotional intelligence of an airport chair. I stared at him. "You came here at 7 in the morning because you still think the child care issue is unresolved?" He frowned slightly. "Well, is it?" For 3 full seconds, nobody spoke. Then something inside me finally detached completely, not emotionally, structurally, like the final bolt holding an old bridge in place, snapping clean through. "You really don't hear yourselves," I said quietly. Vanessa sighed dramatically. "Natalie, please stop acting like we abused you." Abused. Interesting she chose that word herself. My mother jumped in immediately. "No one abused anyone. Families help each other." I nodded slowly. "Okay, let's test that." I looked directly at Vanessa. "When was the last time you helped me?" Silence. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Ethan, then back at me. That's different. How? You don't have kids. Not, you don't need help. Not, you're okay. Just, your suffering doesn't qualify. I turned toward my father's empty place in the room automatically before remembering he wasn't there. Of course he wasn't there. Men like my father always arrived after emotional damage, when cleanup became safer. My mother crossed her arms. You're making yourself into a victim. No, I said calmly. I'm finally noticing I've been one. That sentence landed. I saw it, a tiny flicker of panic in Vanessa's eyes. Because once somebody names the dynamic out loud, the system starts collapsing. Ethan checked his watch again. We're wasting time. I looked at him. No, you're losing control of somebody you assumed would always cooperate. His jaw tightened instantly. There it was, finally, a reaction. Vanessa moved closer to me, lowering her voice. Natalie, please. For one dangerous second, she looked sincere. Then she said the worst possible thing. You know Mom can't handle stress anymore. Ah, there it was, the emotional weapon. Guilt. Always guilt. My mother sat dramatically on the couch, pressing fingers against her temple. I barely slept. I almost admired the choreography, years of practice, Vanessa playing mediator, my mother becoming fragile, Ethan presenting logistics, every role perfectly assigned. And mine? Compliance. Always compliance. Except this time the machine wasn't working, because I could suddenly see every moving part. I walked toward my kitchen slowly. 3 coffee mugs sat drying beside the sink. A yellow sticky note from Marisol clung to my fridge from weeks earlier. Your voice matters. I touched it briefly, then turned back around. I'm not staying with the kids. My mother's eyes hardened immediately. So that's final? Yes. Vanessa's face flushed red. You're unbelievable. I blinked slowly. Interesting. Not the woman publicly excluded from a family vacation. Not the daughter treated like unpaid staff. No, the unbelievable one was the person who finally said no. Ethan exhaled sharply. We already booked everything. Then hire someone. You know strangers can't manage Carter properly. I stared at him. You mean the tasks I've been performing for free suddenly have measurable value? That hit him harder than expected. Because people like Ethan understood money instinctively. Once labor became quantifiable, the illusion of family help started looking suspiciously like exploitation. My mother stood abruptly. That's enough. We are not doing this. I tilted my head slightly. You already did this. Silence. Heavy, breathing silence. Then Vanessa's phone buzzed loudly. She glanced down automatically, and her entire face changed. Fear. Real fear. What? Ethan asked sharply. She swallowed, then looked at me. Natalie? My stomach tightened instantly. What? She turned her phone around slowly. Instagram. Invisible Daughters. My latest episode clip. And directly beneath it, thousands of comments. One comment pinned at the top read, "This creator understands emotional neglect so perfectly, it feels autobiographical." Another, "I hope whoever hurt her hears this someday." Another, "You can tell this woman survived being invisible inside her own family." My blood went cold. Vanessa's voice dropped. "This is you?" Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And suddenly my entire hidden life stood in the middle of my apartment, exposed under fluorescent kitchen lighting. My mother frowned. "What is this?" Vanessa looked horrified. "Natalie has a podcast." Ethan scoffed immediately. Everybody has a podcast. But Vanessa kept scrolling. Her face drained further with every swipe. "This account has 80,000 followers." 82, I corrected automatically. Dead silence. My mother stared at me like I had started speaking another language. "What are you talking about?" I should have denied it. Part of me wanted to protect it, hide it, keep them away from the one meaningful thing I had built. But another part of me suddenly felt exhausted by secrecy. So exhausted. "Yes," I said quietly. "Invisible Daughters is mine." The room changed instantly. Energy shifted violently. My mother looked genuinely confused, not angry yet, confused, as if she couldn't process the idea that I had an inner life large enough to become visible to strangers. Vanessa kept scrolling rapidly. "Oh my God." "What now?" Ethan muttered. She looked up slowly. 500,000 downloads. Now even Ethan stopped moving. I watched realization spread across the room piece by piece. The expensive microphones visible in my apartment, editing software on my laptop, production notes on my table. The version of me they never noticed because they never looked closely enough. "You never told us," Vanessa whispered. And something about that sentence almost made me smile, because it accidentally revealed the truth. Not, "we never asked," not, "we never listened," only, "you never told us," like relationships were entirely the responsibility of the quieter person. "I tried," I said softly. My mother scoffed immediately. "No, you didn't." I looked directly at her. "When Daniel left me, you changed the subject after 4 minutes and asked if I could still watch the kids Saturday night." Her face tightened. I continued. "When I said I was taking audio production classes, you laughed and asked if I was starting a midlife crisis early." Vanessa looked uncomfortable now. I wasn't done. "When I told you I was exhausted last Christmas, you handed me wrapping paper and said everyone gets tired." Nobody interrupted me. Not because they respected my pain, because they were stunned I had started remembering it out loud. Ethan crossed his arms. "So what? You made some internet content." Internet content. I almost pitied him. Marisol once told me emotionally shallow people always shrink things they don't understand because minimizing protects their ego. Before I could answer, my laptop screen lit up with an incoming call notification. Marisol Vega, producer, Northline Studios. Everybody saw it. Vanessa read the name first, then Ethan, then my mother. I answered slowly without breaking eye contact with them. "Hey." Marisol's voice exploded through speaker volume because Bluetooth was still connected. "Natalie, holy. Okay, first of all, do not panic, but Northline wants to fast-track the contract meeting because your engagement numbers exploded overnight." Nobody in the apartment moved. Marisol continued breathlessly. "Apparently some huge therapy account reposted your clip, and now celebrities are sharing it. Also, one of your old episodes just hit trending." I closed my eyes briefly. Perfect timing. "Natalie?" Marisol asked carefully. "You there?" "Yeah." "Are you okay?" I opened my eyes and looked directly at my family. 4 people standing inside my apartment, finally realizing the daughter they treated like emotional support staff had quietly built something powerful enough to exist without them. And for the first time in my entire life, they looked afraid of losing me. Nobody spoke after Marisol hung up. Not immediately. The silence inside my apartment felt dense enough to touch. My mother stood near the couch, completely motionless, her designer purse hanging stiffly from her wrist. Vanessa still held her phone in one hand, frozen on the Invisible Daughters page. Ethan looked irritated in the specific way powerful men do when they realize a situation contains value they failed to identify early. And suddenly I understood something ugly. If Invisible Daughters had failed, they would have kept dismissing me forever. Success was the first language they respected. That realization hurt more than the anniversary dinner. My mother recovered first. Of course she did. Women like Celeste Mercer survive through narrative control. "Well," she said slowly, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from her sleeve, "if this little project is becoming successful, that's wonderful." Little project. There it was, even now. Even after 80,000 followers, 500,000 downloads, a studio deal, she still needed it to feel smaller than her. I looked at her calmly. It's not little. Something flashed across her face, not guilt, annoyance, because correction from me still felt inappropriate to her. Vanessa stepped closer carefully. "Why didn't you tell us any of this?" I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because the answer was standing right in front of her. "Would you have listened?" Silence. Real silence. The kind that exposes people. Ethan cleared his throat. "So, what exactly is the plan here?" Plan. Everything always became logistics once emotions got uncomfortable. "I'm flying to Los Angeles next week." My mother blinked. "For what?" I held her gaze. "For my future." That sentence landed harder than anything else I had said all morning, because for the first time, my future did not include automatic access for them. Vanessa looked genuinely panicked now. "But Aspen's next week." "Yes," I said softly. "I know." The realization spread slowly across her face, then horror. "You're seriously choosing a podcast over family?" There it was, the sentence emotionally manipulative families always use when they lose control. Choosing yourself becomes betrayal. I folded my arms. "No, I'm choosing myself for the first time instead of only choosing family." My mother's eyes sharpened instantly. "That is an incredibly selfish thing to say." I nodded slowly. "Interesting. 33 years of unpaid labor, normal. One boundary, selfish." Ethan stepped forward. "Let's just calm down and think rationally." I stared at him. "You announced childcare expectations for me in public without asking me once." "That's not what happened." "It literally is." Vanessa rubbed her forehead dramatically. "You're blowing this up into some trauma narrative because strangers online validated you." That sentence almost worked. Almost. Old conditioning stirred inside me immediately. Maybe I was dramatic. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe... Then I looked at Carter's tiny backpack sitting near my kitchen chair from the last time I babysat overnight. Inside it were emergency snacks, allergy medication, extra socks, and a handwritten sleep routine, all packed by me, not his parents, me. And suddenly the guilt disappeared again. "No," I said quietly. "I'm finally seeing the truth without protecting all of you from it." My mother's voice went cold. "You sound ungrateful." Ungrateful, the favorite weapon of people who confuse control with generosity. I took a slow breath. You gave me responsibilities, I said, not care. That one hit. I saw it physically. Vanessa looked down instantly. Even Ethan stopped talking. Because deep down, they knew. They all knew. My father arrived 12 minutes later. I remember the exact timing because tension makes people notice strange details. His knock sounded softer than my mother's had. When I opened the door, he looked older than he had 2 days earlier. Not physically, emotionally. Like something inside him had finally become difficult to avoid. He stepped into the apartment, slowly taking in the scene immediately. Vanessa crying quietly now. My mother furious. Ethan irritated. Me standing near the kitchen counter, no longer apologizing for existing. He looked at me first. Natalie. No anger, no lecture. That almost made it worse. Dad, I said evenly. My mother moved instantly toward him. She's leaving for Los Angeles. Interesting. Not, she's hurt. Not, we crossed a line. Only, she's becoming unavailable. My father loosened his tie slowly. Then he looked around my apartment. The microphone, the editing equipment, the production notes, the follower statistics still open on Vanessa's phone. I watched realization settle into him, piece by piece. All these years, and he had no idea who his daughter actually was. He sat down carefully on the couch. When did all this start? The question broke my heart a little, not because it was cruel, because he genuinely didn't know. 2 years ago. He stared at the floor briefly. 2 years. My mother immediately interrupted. Well, maybe if she communicated instead of acting like a martyr. Celeste, he said quietly. The room froze because my father almost never interrupted my mother publicly. She looked stunned. He looked exhausted. Then he turned back toward me. Why didn't you tell me? I swallowed carefully. I tried. And this time, I gave specifics. The night your chest scans came back clear after the hospital scare? I told you I'd started recording interviews. His forehead tightened slightly. I continued. You nodded and asked me to help refinance the lake house paperwork instead. His eyes dropped. The weekend after Daniel left me, I tried to tell both of you I thought something was wrong with how I lived. Vanessa looked away immediately. You said everybody gets overwhelmed sometimes, I told her softly. Then handed me Mila because your babysitter canceled. Nobody defended themselves now. Not because they accepted responsibility, because the evidence was too ordinary to deny. That's the thing about emotional neglect. It's built from tiny moments repeated thousands of times until somebody disappears inside them. My father rubbed his hands together slowly. When did you become this unhappy? I looked at him for a long moment, then answered honestly. I don't think I noticed how unhappy I was until I realized strangers listened to me more carefully than my own family did. That sentence destroyed the room. My mother looked furious. Vanessa looked ashamed. And my father looked devastated. Good. Not because I wanted revenge, because somebody finally needed to feel the weight I had been carrying alone. The next 40 minutes changed everything. Not dramatically, quietly, which somehow hurt more. Vanessa eventually sat at my kitchen table, crying into paper towels from beside the microwave. I didn't know, she whispered repeatedly, and maybe part of her meant it. Not fully, but partially. People like Vanessa survive by never examining who absorbs the cost of their comfort. Examining it now was breaking her self-image apart in real time. Ethan stayed mostly silent after that, but silence from men like Ethan is revealing, because when logic fails, they run out of humanity quickly. My mother remained the hardest. Even cornered by truth, she still fought for control. "You're rewriting history," she snapped at one point. "No," I said softly. "I stopped editing it to protect you." That line hit her harder than anything else, because it was true. I had spent years translating her cruelty into stress, her selfishness into anxiety, her neglect into misunderstanding. I had protected her reputation even inside my own memories. Not anymore. At 10:14 a.m., my father finally stood. "We should go." My mother stared at him. "That's it?" He looked suddenly tired. "What exactly are we defending anymore, Celeste?" The room went completely still. Because after 42 years of marriage, Richard Mercer had finally asked the one question nobody in our family was allowed to ask. My mother grabbed her purse immediately. "I will not be villainized in my daughter's apartment." And there it was. Not, "I hurt you." Not, "I'm sorry." Only, "How dare you describe what happened accurately?" She walked toward the door, then paused. "You know what your problem is, Natalie?" I met her eyes calmly. "You finally found strangers willing to tell you you're special." The old Natalie would have shattered hearing that, because my mother knew exactly where to cut. But something inside me had changed too deeply now. I looked at her quietly. "No," I said. "I finally found people who listened." She had no response to that. None. She left first. Ethan followed immediately after muttering something about space and cooling off. Vanessa lingered near the doorway, crying softly. Then she looked at me with swollen eyes and whispered, "I really did love having you there." That sentence almost broke me, because I believed her, and that was the tragedy. She loved me. She just loved what I carried for her more. I walked over slowly. "I know." "Will you still see the kids?" There it was, even now, need before repair. I looked down briefly before answering. Not like before. She nodded through tears. Somewhere deep down, she finally understood. Then she left too. Only my father remained. The apartment suddenly felt strangely quiet without everyone else's emotional noise filling it. He stood near the window looking out at wet Chicago streets below. "I failed you," he said finally. Simple, direct, no defense, no explanation. And somehow that hurt worst of all, because it was the first honest thing any parent had ever said to me. I felt tears rise instantly. Not dramatic tears, not movie tears. Exhausted tears. The kind your body saves for moments truth finally arrives too late. "I kept waiting for somebody to notice," I whispered. My father closed his eyes briefly. "I know." "No," I said softly. "You didn't." That landed too. He nodded slowly. "You're right." Rain tapped lightly against the windows. A siren echoed faintly somewhere downtown. My father looked around my apartment one last time. The equipment, the notes, the life I had built quietly without any of them. Then he looked at me carefully. I listened to one episode in the car before I came up. My chest tightened. You did? He nodded once. The one about the eldest daughters. Oh, that episode. The hardest one I had ever recorded. The one where my voice cracked halfway through editing and I almost deleted the entire thing. My father swallowed hard. You sounded lonely. I laughed softly through tears. I was. He looked like someone had physically struck him. Then very quietly he asked, Is there any way to fix this? I thought about that question for a long time. Long enough that the radiator hissed twice beside the wall. Finally, I answered honestly, I don't know. And that was the truth. Because forgiveness is not immediate just because someone finally notices your pain. Healing takes longer than realization. My father nodded slowly. Then he walked toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped. I'm proud of you, Natalie. I almost collapsed hearing it. Not because the words fixed anything, because I had needed them for so many years. After he left, I stood alone in my apartment listening to silence settle back into the rooms. No criticism, no expectations, no emotional assignments waiting for me. Just me. At 11:03 a.m., my laptop chimed again. Northline Studios, flight itinerary attached. Los Angeles, Tuesday morning, business class, hotel booked under my name. Under my name. I stared at the confirmation email while sunlight slowly broke through rain clouds outside my windows. Then I opened my closet, pulled down the large suitcase, and this time, I actually packed it. 3 months later, Invisible Daughters launched nationally through Northline Studios. The premiere episode hit number 3 on the documentary charts within 48 hours. Then number 1. Articles appeared everywhere. The voice giving burned out women their language back. The podcast exposing emotional labor inside modern families. My face finally became public, not hidden anymore, not anonymous. Visible, completely visible. And ironically, that's when my family finally started listening to me. Vanessa entered therapy twice a week. She hired full-time childcare. For the first time in her adult life, she started raising her own children without outsourcing emotional survival to somebody else. Our relationship became quieter after that, smaller, but more honest. My mother struggled the most, because people who build identities around appearances rarely survive truth comfortably. For months, she refused to mention the podcast directly, called it your media thing. Then one afternoon, she mailed me a handwritten letter. No excuses, no performance, just one sentence that mattered. I did not realize how often I asked you to disappear for us. I cried reading that alone in my Los Angeles apartment, not because everything was healed, because accountability had finally entered the room. And my father? He listened to every single episode, every one. Sometimes at 5 a.m., I still receive short texts from him after new releases. I heard this one twice. You were right. I'm sorry. Simple, late, real. As for me, I stopped measuring my worth by usefulness. That was the real victory. Not fame, not money, not success. Freedom. Freedom from earning love through exhaustion. Freedom from disappearing to keep everyone else comfortable. Freedom from confusing self-sacrifice with goodness. Last week, I stood backstage before a live recording in New York, while nearly 2,000 women filled an auditorium waiting to hear me speak. The crowd sounded like ocean waves behind the curtain. Marisol squeezed my shoulder. "You nervous?" I smiled softly. "A little." Then she laughed. "Good. Means it matters." A stage assistant handed me the microphone, the same kind I bought years ago after wandering into that tiny bookstore completely broken and unseen. Funny how life works. Sometimes the thing that saves you begins quietly. A cheap microphone, a small boundary, one calm no. I walked onto the stage as applause erupted through the theater, and for the first time in my life, nobody was asking me to serve them. They were there to hear me.